My name is Emily Carter. I was 18 years old when my father decided my future was not mine to have. No daughter of mine needs college, my father said. Then he took my acceptance letter to the University of Michigan, read it once with that tight, unreadable expression he always wore when something didn't fit into his version of the world, and tore it straight down the middle right there at the kitchen table. My mother's old table. He didn't rush it. That's what I remember most. He didn't rip it in anger. He did it slowly, deliberately, like he was correcting a mistake. Like the letter itself had offended him. 2 clean halves. Then 4. The pieces fell onto my plate, landing beside a fork I had polished 10 minutes earlier and a napkin folded into the exact rectangle he preferred. That letter was everything. A partial scholarship. 8 months of applications I filled out in secret. Essays written past midnight with a flashlight under my blanket because my father believed lights out meant lights out. A guidance counselor who slipped me fee waivers and told me, "You're smarter than the life you're being given." And just like that, it was gone. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. Because within less than a minute, my grandmother did something that would unravel every rule my father had built over the last 15 years. And it all started with a piece of paper he didn't even know existed. Before I take you back to how everything led up to that night, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories if you find yourself pulled into stories like this. And if you're listening right now, drop your city and time in the comments. I always wonder where these stories are landing. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the kind of house that looked perfectly normal from the outside. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. A 2-story colonial with beige siding, dark green shutters, and a front yard my father mowed every Saturday morning at exactly 7 a.m. Not because he enjoyed it, but because he needed the neighbors to see him doing it. Appearances mattered to him. Control mattered more. Inside that house, everything had a place, and every place belonged to him. The thermostat never went above 65 in the winter because he said anything higher was wasteful. The TV remote stayed on the right armrest of his recliner, his chair, his channel, his schedule. Dinner was served at 6 sharp every night, and if anything was out of place, the salt shaker, the glass, the timing, he wouldn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He would just look at you. That look, quiet, steady, disappointed, like you had failed some invisible test you didn't even know you were taking, was worse than yelling ever could have been. The kitchen table had been in the house longer than I had. Solid oak, slightly worn at the edges, with a faint scratch running across the surface where my mother once dropped a pan years ago. My grandmother had bought it when the house was first furnished, long before I was old enough to remember. But my father called it his table. Just like he called everything else his. My house. My rules. I heard that sentence so often growing up it stopped sounding like words and started sounding like a law of nature. I was 9 the first time he handed me a frying pan and told me to make breakfast. I burned the eggs. He didn't yell. He just stood there, watching, then said in that same flat tone, "Your mother could do this without thinking. Figure it out." So I did. Eggs turned into pancakes. Pancakes turned into full dinners. By the time I was 13, I could cook a full meal without a recipe, clean the kitchen without being asked, and pack both my lunch and my father's before the sun came up. By 14, I was doing the laundry, scrubbing bathrooms, vacuuming every room on a schedule that never changed. By 15, I stopped thinking of it as helping. I just thought of it as what I was supposed to do. I wasn't his daughter. I just didn't have the language for that yet. My mother's name was Rachel. She had this way of tucking her hair behind her ear when she laughed, like she was trying to hold on to the moment. I remember that, and I remember her voice, soft but steady, the kind of voice that made you feel safe even when nothing else did. I was 10 when she died. Ovarian cancer. It moved fast. Too fast. By the time they caught it, it was already spreading. By the time spring came around, she was gone. After the funeral, the house didn't just get quieter. It got smaller. The photos disappeared first. Every picture of my mother, off the walls, off the fridge, off the hallway shelf, packed into a box and moved to the garage like she had never existed. I managed to keep one. A small photo of the two of us at the Franklin County Fair. I was holding cotton candy, she was laughing, and the sunlight caught her hair just right. I kept it hidden inside an old paperback under my mattress, pulling it out only when I knew he was at work. Then the rules changed. No talking about her at the dinner table. No crying where he could see it. No asking questions about the past. Life moves forward, he said once when I slipped and mentioned her name. Dwelling doesn't fix anything. But I learned something much later. It wasn't about moving forward. It was about control. When I was 12, I told him I wanted to be a teacher someday. He didn't even look up from his plate. Your mother had dreams too, he said, cutting his food like the conversation didn't matter. Look where that got her. He said it like it was a fact. Like her dying was some kind of consequence. That was the first time something inside me shifted, just slightly, like a crack forming in glass. But cracks don't break anything right away. They just wait. My days became routine, so consistent I could measure time without a clock. 5:30 a.m., alarm. 5:45, coffee started, eggs on the stove. 6:15, lunch is packed. 6:45, dishes done. 7:10, out the door. School wasn't an escape. It was just a pause. Because I knew exactly what was waiting when I got back. Chores. Cooking. Silence. No clubs. No sports. No staying late. You've got responsibilities, he would say, like I was an adult with a mortgage instead of a teenager with homework and a future I wasn't allowed to think about. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I leave? I was 17 with maybe $20 hidden in a shoebox. I couldn't sign anything, couldn't open a bank account, couldn't just walk away without somewhere to go. And there was one more thing. My grandmother. Her name is Margaret Hayes, and she was the only person who still spoke to me like I mattered. She didn't live with us. She had a small apartment across town, a place that smelled like cinnamon and old books and something warm I could never quite name. She came over for dinner once a week. And every time she did, something in the house shifted. Not enough to break my father's rules. But enough to remind me they weren't the only ones that existed. So I stayed. I stayed quiet. I stayed useful. I stayed exactly where he expected me to be. Until the day something arrived in the mail that was never supposed to reach me. Because here's the thing my father didn't know. I had applied to college. Not out loud. Not proudly. In secret. Like it was something I wasn't supposed to want. It started in a place my father never paid attention to. School. Not because he didn't care about grades. He did, in a distant, transactional way. Good grades meant I was doing what I was supposed to do. They were proof I wasn't wasting time. But school itself, the people in it, the possibilities it held, none of that mattered to him. Which is probably why it became the only place where my life started to feel like it belonged to me. Her name was Mrs. Alvarez, my guidance counselor. Mid-50s, sharp eyes behind thin-framed glasses, the kind of woman who noticed things other people ignored. She noticed the way I rushed out of school every day like I had a timer running. She noticed I never signed up for anything, never stayed after, never even lingered in the hallways. And one afternoon during my junior year, she asked me to stay behind. She closed her office door, sat across from me, and said, "Emily, what do you want to do after graduation?" No one had ever asked me that before. Not really. Teachers asked about assignments. My father asked about responsibilities. But no one had ever asked me what I wanted. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud felt dangerous. I want to go to college, I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. Mrs. Alvarez didn't react with surprise. She didn't question it. She just nodded, like I had said something completely normal. Okay, she said. Then let's figure out how to get you there. That was the moment everything started. She helped me with everything my father would have shut down instantly if he'd known. SAT prep books she let me borrow from her office. Application fee waivers she quietly printed and slid across her desk. Essay drafts written during lunch, my handwriting tight and careful as I tried to fit my entire life into a few paragraphs. We used the school's address for every application. Because my father checked the mailbox every single day. Not casually. Not absent-mindedly. He treated it like inventory. Bills, flyers, anything with my name on it, he saw it first. So we worked around him. Every envelope I sent out carried the school's return address. Every reply was sent there first, held safely in Mrs. Alvarez's office until I could pick it up. It felt like planning an escape. And in a way, it was. But I didn't do it alone. I told my grandmother. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting in Mrs. Alvarez's office after school, the late afternoon sun coming through the window, making everything feel warmer than it actually was. Mrs. Alvarez handed me the phone and stepped out, giving me privacy without making it feel like secrecy. I dialed my grandmother's number with hands that wouldn't stay still. She answered on the second ring. Emily, honey? Her voice always did that, softened everything. I applied to college, I said, the words tumbling out faster than I could control. I didn't tell him. I couldn't tell him. But I did it, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what happens if he finds out. Breathe, she said gently. I stopped, pulling in air like I'd been holding it for years. Then I told her everything. The applications. The essays. The plan to keep it hidden. The fear sitting in my chest like something alive. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, there was a pause on the line, the kind that feels full instead of empty. Then she said, use my address as a backup. I blinked. What? For anything important, she said. I'll watch for it. You won't miss anything. That was it. No lecture. No hesitation. Just support. It was the first time in a long time that something felt possible. Weeks passed. Then months. Every time I walked into Mrs. Alvarez's office, my heart would race, not knowing if there would be something waiting for me. Most days, there wasn't. Rejections came first. A small envelope. Then another. I opened them quietly, folded them back up, and told myself it was fine. That I had expected. That this was normal. But every no still landed heavier than I wanted to admit. Then one afternoon in early March, Mrs. Alvarez called me in again. She didn't say anything at first. She just held out a large envelope. Thick. Important. My name printed across the front. My hands started shaking before I even touched it. Go ahead, she said softly. I opened it carefully, like it might disappear if I moved too fast. University of Michigan. Accepted. Partial scholarship. For a second, I didn't feel anything at all. Then it hit all at once, relief, disbelief, something sharp and overwhelming that made my eyes sting. I got in, I whispered. Mrs. Alvarez smiled. Not big, not dramatic. Just proud. I know, she said. I called my grandmother that night. She cried. Not loudly, not in a way that needed attention, but quietly, like something she had been holding on to for years had finally loosened. I'm so proud of you, she said. There was something else in her voice too. Something I didn't fully understand yet. Don't worry about the money, she added after a moment. We'll figure that out. We. Not you. Not me. We. I didn't question it. I didn't know how. But I held on to it. Because for the first time, my future didn't feel like something imaginary. It felt real. Close enough to touch. And that's when things started to shift in ways I didn't see coming. Because while I was planning my way out, my father was planning something else entirely. I found out by accident. I came home one afternoon earlier than usual. A teacher meeting had been cancelled, and for once, I walked through the front door before 5. My father was in the kitchen. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the paper in his hand. He folded it quickly when he saw me, too quickly. "What are you doing at home?" he asked. "Meeting got cancelled," I said, setting my bag down slowly. He nodded, but his attention had already shifted back to whatever he was holding. I caught a glimpse of a logo before he turned it away. Rosie's Diner. A place just off Route 23. Small. Busy. The kind of place where people worked long hours for tips that barely added up. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. 2 days later, I overheard him on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen. I was in the hallway, on my way upstairs, when I heard my name. "Starts right after graduation," he was saying. 30 hours a week, maybe more if needed. I stopped. She's responsible. Knows how to handle a kitchen. A pause. Yeah, I signed everything already. Something cold settled in my stomach. Signed everything. My name. Without me. I stayed where I was, not moving, barely breathing. "College," he said after a second, his tone shifting, sharper now. "No. That's not happening." Another pause. Waste of time. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. He wasn't just against my future. He was replacing it. Brick by brick. Decision by decision. And I had no idea how far he had already gone. That night, I called my grandmother again. This time, I didn't try to sound calm. "He got me a job," I said. "He signed my name. He's planning everything and I don't know how to stop him." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would stay with me long after that conversation ended. "Then we don't stop him the way he expects." I frowned, even though she couldn't see me. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that you don't fight him alone." There was a pause. "Sunday," she added. "Tell him on Sunday at dinner. I'll be there." My heart started racing again, but this time it wasn't fear alone. It was something else. Something sharper. "You're sure?" I asked. "I am," she said. Then, softer, "Bring the letter." I looked down at the acceptance packet sitting hidden in my drawer. The one thing he hadn't seen yet. "Okay," I said. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that my father had already made one more move behind my back. A move that would have ended everything before it even began. And if it weren't for a small detail he overlooked, something so simple he didn't think twice about it, I would have lost my future before I ever had the chance to fight for it. Sunday was coming. And everything was about to change. Sunday came the way it always did in our house, structured, predictable, almost rehearsed. Dinner at 6. Not 6ish. Not when the food was ready. 6. By 5:30, I was already in the kitchen, moving through the routine my body knew better than my mind. Roast chicken in the oven, seasoned exactly the way he liked it. Mashed potatoes on the stove. Green beans sautéed with garlic, not too much, not too little. Everything in its place. Everything on time. The house smelled like rosemary and butter, warm and familiar, the kind of smell people associate with comfort. But standing there, stirring a pot while watching the clock tick towards 6, it felt like something else entirely. Like a performance. Like a stage I had been standing on for years, saying the same lines, hitting the same marks, never missing a cue. Until tonight. Because tonight, I wasn't just cooking dinner. I was about to change everything. My acceptance letter was hidden under the seat cushion of my chair at the table, sealed in an envelope, edges still crisp. I had checked it 3 times already, making sure it was still there, still real. My way out. Or at least, the possibility of one. At 5:45, my grandmother arrived. Right on time, like always. Margaret Hayes never rushed. She moved with intention, every step deliberate, every action measured. She wore her usual long wool coat, soft gray this time, and carried her leather handbag over her arm, the same one she had used for as long as I could remember. She stepped inside, and for a moment, just a moment, the air in the house shifted. She kissed my cheek, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder, a quiet squeeze that said more than words ever could. "You ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, even though I wasn't. Not really. But I didn't have a choice anymore. My father came downstairs a few minutes later, already in a good mood. That should have been my first warning. He didn't usually smile before dinner. He didn't usually comment on the food. But that night, he walked into the kitchen, glanced at the table, and said, "Smells good." Just like that. Casual. Easy. And something about it made my stomach tighten. Because my father was only ever this relaxed when things were going exactly the way he wanted them to. We took our places at the table. Him at the head, like always. Me to his right. My grandmother is at the far end, closest to the kitchen. The same seats. The same arrangement. The same quiet understanding of where everyone belonged. I served the plates. Set the glasses. Made sure the napkins were folded the way he liked. Then I sat down. He took the first bite, chewed slowly, nodded once. Approval. The room settled into silence, broken only by the faint clink of silverware against plates. I could feel my heartbeat in my hands. Now. It had to be now. Before I could overthink it, before I could lose whatever small piece of courage I had managed to gather, I reached under the seat cushion and pulled out the envelope. "Dad," I said. My voice sounded steady. My hands didn't. He looked up, mildly annoyed at the interruption, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What?" "I got accepted to college," I said, placing the envelope on the table in front of him. "University of Michigan. With a scholarship." For a second, nothing happened. Then he set his fork down. Slowly. He picked up the envelope, turned it over once, then pulled out the letter. His eyes moved across the page, line by line, his expression tightening with each second that passed. The room felt smaller. Quieter. Like everything was holding its breath. Then his face changed. Not anger. Something heavier. Something colder. He tore the letter in half. The sound cut through the room, sharp and clean. He tore it again. And again. Until the pieces were small enough to scatter. He dropped them onto his plate. Right next to the chicken bones. "No daughter of mine needs college," he said. His voice wasn't loud. That would have been easier. It was calm. Final. Like he was stating a rule that had always existed. "You're staying here," he continued, picking up his fork again like nothing had happened. "You've got a job starting at Rosie's next month. That's already taken care of." My chest tightened. So it was true. He had already decided. Already planned. Already signed my future away without even telling me. I looked down at the pieces of my letter, my hands resting in my lap, fingers curled tightly together. Months of work. Late nights. Every quiet hope I had built, sitting there in pieces, soaking into the edge of his plate. Then he said the one thing that made everything inside me go still. "Your mother had the same ideas," he said, cutting into his food. Wanted more. Thought she needed something outside this house. He didn't look at me. And where is she now? The words landed heavier than anything else he had done. Not because they were loud. But because they weren't. Because he said them like they meant nothing. Like her life, her dreams, her death, were just an example. A warning. I felt something rise in my chest, sharp and overwhelming, but I forced it down. Crying in front of him wasn't an option. It never had been. The silence stretched across the table. Then he leaned back slightly, his attention shifting. "This is your doing, isn't it?" he said, looking at my grandmother. His tone changed, edged with something sharper now. "You've been filling her head with this nonsense." My grandmother didn't move. Didn't react. She sat there, hands resting lightly on either side of her plate, her expression unreadable. "You've always coddled her," he continued. "Just like you did Rachel." He said my mother's name like it was something unpleasant. "Look how that turned out." Still, she said nothing. The silence pressed in again. "Clear the table," he said to me, dismissing the moment entirely. "We're done with this conversation." I stood up automatically. 9 years of habit pulling me forward before I could think. My hands reached for his plate. And then, "Sit down, Emily." My grandmother's voice wasn't loud. But it stopped me completely. There was something different in it. Not softness. Not hesitation. Something firm. Something final. I froze. My father's head snapped toward her. "Ma," he said sharply. "Stay out of this." She didn't look at him. She looked at me. "Sit," she repeated. I slowly lowered myself back into my chair. My father let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is my house," he said, his voice rising slightly. "My daughter. My decision. You don't get a vote either," he added, glancing toward the empty end of the table like he was addressing someone else who wasn't there. Then he turned back to me. "And since we're being clear," he continued, his tone shifting again, quieter now, more controlled, "I already spoke to the university." My stomach dropped. "I called them on Thursday," he said. "Told them I was your father. Tried to withdraw your acceptance." The room tilted. "They said they needed your signature," he added, irritation slipping into his voice. "Some policy." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto mine. "So you're going to sign that withdrawal form tonight? Right here. In front of everyone." There it was. Not just control. Not just denial. He wanted me to do it myself. To end it with my own hand. To make it official. Public. Final. The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier. Longer. I became aware of everything all at once, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breathing. My grandmother hadn't moved. Not yet. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Like the moment before a storm breaks. And then, slowly, she placed her napkin on the table. Neatly. Precisely. Like everything she did. And she stood up. She didn't rush. That's the part that stayed with me later, long after everything else had already changed. My grandmother stood up slowly, the legs of her chair making a soft, controlled sound against the hardwood floor. Not a scrape. Not a jolt. Just enough to remind everyone in the room that something was happening. She reached for her coat, the gray wool one she had worn in, draping it over her shoulders one arm at a time, her movements calm, deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. My father let out a short laugh. Not loud. Not amused. Dismissive. "Where are you going?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Dinner's not over." She didn't answer right away. She finished buttoning her coat, smoothing the front with her hands, then walked back toward the table and stopped behind her chair. Only then did she look at him. Not past him. Not through him. At him. The way you look at someone when you've finally stopped trying to make excuses for them. Pack her bags, she said. 2 words. Calm. Clear. Unmistakable. For a second, the room didn't react. Then my father laughed again, this time louder, fuller, the kind of laugh that fills a space because it assumes it owns it. Pack her bags, he repeated, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And send her where? With what money? My grandmother didn't respond to the questions. Instead, she reached down, unclasped her leather handbag, and pulled out a stack of papers. They were held together neatly, a single staple in the corner, edges aligned, the kind of organization that didn't happen by accident. She placed them on the table. Right in front of him. The sound they made was soft. But it carried. My father's smile lingered for a second longer, like it hadn't caught up yet. Then it faded. Not all at once. It slipped. Piece by piece. What is this? He asked, his voice tightening just slightly. My grandmother rested her hands lightly on the back of her chair. A deed, she said. The word sat in the air. Simple. Heavy. He didn't touch it right away. He looked at it first, like it might change if he stared at it long enough. Then he reached forward, slower this time, and pulled the papers toward him. I watched his eyes move across the page. Once. Twice. His jaw tightened. This house, my grandmother continued, her voice steady, has been in my name since 2008. Silence. I bought it after your father passed, she added. With his life insurance and my savings. My father's eyes flicked up to hers, sharp, searching. You let us live here, she said. Because you had 2 children and nowhere else to go. She paused, just long enough for the words to settle. But I never transferred ownership. The air in the room changed. It didn't shift. It dropped. Like something invisible had just been pulled out from under everything we thought was solid. My father let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but it didn't carry the same confidence as before. That's, he started, then stopped, recalibrating. That doesn't mean anything. He pushed the papers slightly, like they were just an inconvenience. I've lived here for 15 years, he continued, his voice picking up strength again. I've paid the bills. I've maintained the house. You think that doesn't count for something? My grandmother didn't interrupt. She let him speak. Let him build his argument. Let him fill the silence. And even if it's in your name, he added, leaning forward, you're not just going to throw me out. Your own son? There it was. Not logic. Not law. Guilt. The same tool he had used on me for years. The same quiet pressure. You don't do this to family. My grandmother held his gaze. I'm not throwing you out, she said. He blinked, thrown off for just a second. I'm giving you a choice. Another pause. Emily goes to college this fall, she said, each word placed carefully. With my support. You let her go. You don't interfere. And you can continue living here. The room went still again. Or, she added, her voice just as calm, you fight this, and I begin the eviction process tonight. My father stared at her. Really stared. Like he was seeing her for the first time. Like the version of her he had built in his mind, quiet, passive, someone who stayed in her lane, didn't match the woman standing in front of him now. You're bluffing, he said. But there was something missing from his voice. Something that had always been there before. Certainty. My grandmother didn't answer. She simply reached into her handbag again and pulled out her phone. Not a smartphone. A small, simple flip phone. She opened it, pressed a button, and held it to her ear. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint ringing. 1 ring. 2. Then. "Hello, David," she said, her tone conversational, almost polite. "It's Margaret Hayes." My father didn't move. "I need you to begin the process we discussed," she continued. "Yes." "The 30-day notice." A pause. "Yes," she said. "Tonight." Another pause. "Thank you." She closed the phone, slipped it back into her bag, and looked at him again. "You have 30 days, she said. Or you let her go." The silence that followed was different from before. Not tense. Not uncertain. Final. My father's expression shifted again, cycling through something I had never seen on his face before. Confusion. Anger. Disbelief. All layered together, none of them settling. "You're really doing this," he said, quieter now. "Over this?" He gestured toward me like I was the problem. "Over her going to school?" My grandmother didn't look at me. She didn't soften. "I'm doing this," she said, "because I should have done it years ago." That landed differently. He opened his mouth, like he was about to argue, to push back, to reassert control the way he always did. But nothing came out. Because for the first time, the rules weren't his anymore. And he knew it. I sat there, still in my chair, my hands resting in my lap, but everything inside me felt like it was shifting. Rearranging. The walls I had lived inside for years, invisible but solid, suddenly didn't feel as permanent. My father turned toward me then, his expression tightening again, reaching for something familiar. "Control." "Tell her to stop," he said, his voice lower now, almost reasonable. "You don't need this. You have a home here." I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit the space he allowed me. "I have a future," I said. The words came out steadier than I expected. And once they were out, I couldn't take them back. He stared at me. Something flickered in his expression. Not understanding. Not acceptance. Something closer to shock. Like he had just realized the version of me he thought he controlled didn't exist anymore. "Go pack a bag," my grandmother said gently. I stood up. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just, up. The way you stand when something inside you has already decided. My father pushed his chair back suddenly, the legs scraping loudly this time. "You're not going anywhere," he said, stepping in front of me. His voice was louder now. Sharper. But it didn't land the same way. Not anymore. I looked at him. And I didn't look away. "I've been staying for 15 years, I said quietly. "I'm done." The words hung there. Simple. But they carried everything. For a second, I thought he might try to stop me. That he might reach out, block the hallway, raise his voice the way he always had. But he didn't. He just stood there. And I walked past him. Up the stairs. Into the room that had never really felt like mine. And for the first time, I wasn't packing because I was told to. I was leaving because I chose to. My room was exactly the way I had left it that morning. Small. Quiet. Controlled. The bed made tight enough to pass inspection. The desk cleared of anything unnecessary. The closet organized by season, by color, by rules that had never been written down but always enforced. For years, this room had felt like the only space that was mine. Now, standing in the doorway, it felt like something else. Temporary. Like a place I had already outgrown without realizing it. I moved quickly, but not in a panic. There was no frantic energy, no chaos. Just a steady, focused urgency, like my body understood something my mind was still catching up to. I pulled my backpack from under the bed. A faded blue one I'd had since sophomore year, the zipper slightly uneven, one strap worn thinner than the other. I had started packing it weeks ago, quietly, in pieces, following Mrs. Alvarez's advice to always have a way out, even if you never need it. At the time, it had felt dramatic. Now it felt like survival. Clothes. Not everything, just enough. Jeans, shirts, a sweater. My toothbrush, a hairbrush, the small things that make a place feel livable. I paused at my desk. The acceptance letter wasn't there anymore. For a second, the image of it, torn into pieces on the dinner table, flashed through my mind. But then I remembered. That letter wasn't the future. It was just proof of it. And proof could be replaced. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder Mrs. Alvarez had given me, copies of everything. Application confirmations, scholarship details, contact information. Backup for a life that had to be built carefully, quietly. I slid it into my bag. Then I reached under my mattress and pulled out the book I had hidden there for years. An old paperback with a cracked spine. Inside it, pressed flat between the pages, was the photo. My mother and me at the county fair. Cotton candy. Sunlight. That moment frozen in time before everything changed. I held it for a second longer than I meant to, my thumb brushing lightly over the edge. "I'm going," I whispered, not sure if I was saying it to her or to myself. Then I tucked it carefully into the inside pocket of my jacket. A soft knock sounded against the doorframe. I turned. My grandmother stood there, her hand resting lightly against the wood, her expression calm but watchful. "You've got what you need?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped inside, her eyes moving briefly around the room, taking in the details without saying anything. Then she looked back at me. "Good," she said softly. There was a pause. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just a moment of understanding passing between us. "Your life doesn't fit in a backpack," she added. "This is just the beginning." I swallowed, nodding again. We walked downstairs together. Each step felt different. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just intentional. My father was standing at the bottom of the staircase. Right where I knew he would be. Blocking the path to the front door. His posture was rigid, one hand resting against the wall, the other clenched loosely at his side. His face had settled into something controlled again, like he had pulled himself back together just enough to try one more time. "If you walk out that door," he said, his voice low, steady, "don't come back." The words were familiar. He had used them before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. A line drawn in the sand. A condition. A test. Before, those words would have stopped me. They would have wrapped around me, tightened, made me hesitate. Now they felt different. Not powerless. But not absolute either. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had controlled every part of my life for as long as I could remember. At the man who thought control was the same thing as love. At the man who believed fear was the same thing as respect. And for the first time, I saw something else. Not strength. Not authority. Just a person. Standing in a doorway. Trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. "I'm not coming back to this," I said quietly. Not angry. Not loud. Just clear. His jaw tightened. "You think this is going to work out for you?" he asked, the edge creeping back into his voice. "You think the world's just waiting to hand you something because you want it?" I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to. "I think," I said finally, "it's mine to try." That landed differently. I could see it. Not in his words. But in the way his expression shifted, just slightly, like something didn't fit anymore. Like the version of me he had built in his mind no longer matched the person standing in front of him. My grandmother stepped forward, not in front of me, not shielding me, just beside me. Present. Steady. Move, Daniel, she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Enough for everything to change. Because that hesitation was something I had never seen before. Not from him. Not in this house. He stepped back. Not much. Just enough. Just enough for there to be space. I walked past him. Close enough to feel the tension in his shoulders, the heat of his presence, the weight of everything he had been for so long. But he didn't reach out. He didn't stop me. The front door was already open. My grandmother had unlocked it before we came downstairs. The night air hit me immediately, cool, sharp, different from the controlled environment inside the house. For a second, I just stood there. On the threshold. Between two versions of my life. Then I stepped forward. Outside. Behind me, I heard movement, my father shifting, maybe turning, maybe watching, I didn't know. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid. But because I didn't need to. The driveway stretched out in front of me, the familiar cracks in the pavement, the edges of the lawn, everything the same as it had always been. And completely different. My grandmother's car was parked at the curb, the engine already running, headlights casting a soft glow across the street. She walked ahead, opening the passenger door. I slid into the seat, my backpack resting on my lap, my hands gripping the straps without realizing it. She got in beside me, closed the door, and without a word, pulled away from the curb. The house stayed in the rearview mirror for a few seconds. Then it got smaller. Then smaller. Then it was just another shape in the distance. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding my breath. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Then shook my head. Then nodded again. She smiled, just slightly. "That sounds about right," she said. We drove in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable. Not empty. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like space instead of pressure. Streetlights passed overhead in steady intervals, casting brief flashes of light across the dashboard, across my hands, across the window. Everything felt unfamiliar. Not the road. Not the city. But the feeling. The absence of something I had carried for so long I hadn't realized how heavy it was. Control. Expectation. Fear. All of it, gone. Or at least, not sitting right next to me anymore. We pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building about 15 minutes later. It wasn't large. Just a simple 3-story building, brick exterior, a few lights glowing in the windows. Ordinary. Safe. She parked the car, turned off the engine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "Ready?" she asked. I looked down at my hands. At the backpack. At everything I had managed to carry with me. Then I looked up. "Yeah," I said. And this time, I meant it. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known in that moment, sitting in that car with the engine still ticking as it cooled, was that leaving the house was only the first step. Because my father wasn't done. Not even close. By morning, he would start calling. By afternoon, he would start rewriting the story. And within days, the entire town would think they knew exactly what had happened. They just wouldn't know the truth. Not yet. My grandmother's apartment was smaller than I expected. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. A narrow kitchen that opened into a living room just big enough for a sofa, a coffee table, and a lamp that cast a warm, steady glow across everything it touched. It smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent and something else I couldn't quite place at first. Then I realized what it was. Quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from people holding their breath. The kind that comes from nothing needing to be said. "Go on," she said, setting her keys down by the door. "Make yourself at home." I stepped inside slowly, my eyes moving across the room, taking everything in. There were books stacked neatly along the walls. A small framed photo of my mother on the side table. A folded blanket draped over the couch. Nothing out of place. Nothing controlled. Just lived in. "I'll take the couch," I said automatically, shifting my backpack on my shoulder. She gave me a look. Not sharp. Not annoyed. Just firm. "You'll take the bed," she said. "I don't mind." "I didn't ask," she replied, but there was a softness under it. "I've slept in worse places. Your grandfather snored like a chainsaw for 40 years. This will be a vacation." I let out a small breath of a laugh before I could stop myself. It felt strange. New. But not bad. "Okay," I said. She nodded once, satisfied, then moved toward the kitchen, already reaching for the kettle. "Sit," she added. "I'll make some tea." I set my bag down by the couch and sat, my hands resting on my knees, my eyes drifting around the room again. Everything felt different. Not overwhelming. Not chaotic. Just unfamiliar in a way that didn't make me tense. Like my body didn't quite know what to do without something pressing down on it. The kettle clicked on. Water filled the silence. And then my phone buzzed. I froze. For a second, I just stared at it where it sat in my hand. The screen lit up. Dad. The word alone made something tighten in my chest. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just watched it ring. Then stop. Then buzz again. And again. My grandmother glanced over from the kitchen but didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The phone stopped after the fourth call. For a moment, everything went quiet again. Then it buzzed once more. A voicemail. I hesitated. Then pressed play. Emily, his voice came through, softer than I had ever heard it. "Come home. We can talk about this." I was upset. "I didn't mean all of it. Just come back and we'll figure it out." I closed my eyes. For a split second, something inside me wavered. Not belief. But familiarity. That tone. That shift. The version of him that appeared when control started slipping. The one that made things sound reasonable. Temporary. Fixable. I didn't respond. I set the phone down. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, I didn't wait. I let it go to voicemail. "You're making a mistake," his voice said, sharper now. "You don't understand how the real world works. You think this is going to end well for you?" I exhaled slowly. The pattern was already there. I knew it. I had lived it. Another hour passed. Another call. Another voicemail. "If you don't come back by the end of the week," he said, his voice flat now, familiar, controlled, "don't expect anything from me. No phone. No support. Nothing. You're on your own." I stared at the screen for a long moment after it went dark. Then I set it face down on the table. "You don't have to listen to those," my grandmother said quietly, setting a mug in front of me. I nodded. "I know." But the words still lingered. Not because they were true. But because they had been, for so long. The next morning, the calls started again. Not just to me. To her. Her phone rang at 7 a.m. She looked at the screen, then silenced it without answering. It rang again at 7:12. 7:26. 7:41. Each time, the same response. Silence. Control, on her terms now. By mid-morning, he had shifted tactics. Because if he couldn't reach us directly, he would reach everything around us. I found out at school. The moment I walked through the doors, I could feel it. The way people looked at me. The way conversations dipped slightly when I passed. The way something invisible had already spread before I even knew what it was. Emily, someone called from behind me. I turned. A girl from my English class, someone I barely spoke to, was holding her phone. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I saw something. My stomach dropped. "What?" She hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. Facebook. My father's account. A post. "My daughter has been manipulated into leaving home by outside influence. She's confused and being taken advantage of. Please keep our family in your prayers." Dozens of comments. Support. Concern. Sympathy. All directed at him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He wasn't just calling. He was rewriting the story. Making himself the victim. Making me the problem. I handed the phone back without saying anything. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I nodded. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not really. Because by lunchtime, it had spread. Questions in the hallway. Whispers behind me. People trying to piece together a version of my life they had no real understanding of. "Did you really run away? I heard your grandma kicked him out. My mom said he's heartbroken." Each comment small. But together, they added up. Pressure. Doubt. Noise. I kept walking. Kept my head steady. Kept my answers simple. "I'm okay." Because explaining it would have taken more than words. And I wasn't ready for that. That afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez pulled me into her office again. She closed the door behind me, her expression already set. "I saw the post," she said. I nodded. She sighed, not in frustration, but in understanding. "This happens more than you think," she said. "When people lose control, they try to control the narrative." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It's working," I said quietly. "For now," she replied. She stepped closer, her tone steady. "But truth has a way of catching up." I wanted to believe that. I did. But in that moment, sitting there with my phone buzzing in my pocket and the weight of everyone else's version of my life pressing in, it didn't feel that simple. Because the truth doesn't spread as fast as the story people want to believe. And my father was very good at giving people exactly that. By the end of the day, he had taken it further. Messages. Texts. Screenshots. All sent to me. All showing the same thing. Support. Validation. Proof, in his mind, that he was right. "See," one message read. "Everyone knows what's really going on." I stared at it for a long time. And for just a second, just a small, quiet second, doubt slipped in. Not about leaving. But about everything else. About the fallout. About the cost. About whether I was strong enough to carry it. I sat there in Mrs. Alvarez's office, the door closed, the world outside still moving like nothing had changed. And I thought. Maybe I should just go back. Maybe it would be easier. Maybe. My phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time, it wasn't from him. It was from my grandmother. "Come home," it read. "We'll figure this out together." I looked at the words. Read them again. And just like that, the doubt didn't disappear. But it shifted. Because I wasn't alone in it anymore. And that changed everything. What I didn't know yet was that my father wasn't just trying to win people over. He was already taking the next step. Legal. Deliberate. And far more serious than anything he had done before. Because within the next 48 hours, he would make a move that could have changed everything again. If we hadn't already been ready for it. 2 days later, the knock came at 8:12 in the morning. I remember the time because my grandmother glanced at the clock just as it sounded, her expression unchanged, like she had been expecting it. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, a bowl of cereal in front of me, the milk turning the edges soft while I stared at nothing in particular, my mind still catching up to everything that had happened. The knock came again. Firm. Professional. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. My grandmother stood, smoothed the front of her sweater, and walked to the door. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. A man stood on the other side, mid-40s, neutral expression, holding a large envelope in one hand. "Margaret Hayes?" he asked. "Yes." "You've been served." He handed her the envelope. Just like that. No drama. No explanation. Just a process, carried out cleanly. She took it, nodded once. "Thank you," she said. He left. The entire exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. She closed the door, turned the lock, and walked back to the table. I watched her set the envelope down in front of her, her fingers resting lightly on top of it for a moment before she opened it. "What is it?" I asked, even though I already had a feeling. She pulled out the papers, scanning them quickly. Then she exhaled, not in surprise, not in panic, just in confirmation. "He filed a response," she said. "Trying to stop the eviction." My stomach tightened. "How?" She flipped a page, her eyes moving steadily. "He's claiming there was an agreement. That I promised him the house." I let out a short breath. "That's not true." "I know," she said calmly. And that was it. No panic. No doubt. Just certainty. Because she had something he didn't. Proof. That same afternoon, we went to see her attorney. David Mercer's office sat above a hardware store on a quiet street downtown. It wasn't impressive. No glass walls, no sleek furniture, just a simple space with shelves of files, a wooden desk, and a framed photo of a golden retriever sitting beside a stack of papers. But the moment he spoke, I understood why my grandmother trusted him. "Let me take a look," he said, adjusting his glasses as he read through the documents. He didn't rush. Didn't react. Just read. Then he set the papers down. "This doesn't change anything," he said. I felt something loosen in my chest. "He can claim whatever he wants," David continued, "but claims aren't evidence. The deed is clear. The tax records are clear. There's no written agreement. Legally, he doesn't have a case." My grandmother nodded. "What's next?" she asked. "We proceed," he said simply. "Hearing will be scheduled. We present the documentation. This gets resolved." It sounded so straightforward. So different from the chaos my father had created. Because this wasn't about emotion. This was about facts. And facts don't bend just because someone wants them to. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks that felt longer than anything I had experienced before. Because my father didn't stop. He escalated. Calls turned into messages. Messages turned into pressure. He contacted relatives we barely spoke to. Old family friends. People who only knew pieces of the story, enough to form opinions, not enough to understand the truth. Each day brought something new. A comment. A rumor. A version of events that painted him as the one who had been wronged. And for a while, it worked. Because people believe what they're told first. Not what's proven later. But slowly, quietly, things started to shift. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just cracks. A neighbor who stopped repeating his story. A teacher who gave me a look that said she understood more than she was saying. Small things. But they added up. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. No grand space. No dramatic setting. Just a room with wooden benches, a raised desk, and a quiet kind of authority that didn't need to prove itself. My father sat on one side. Pressed shirt. Tense posture. His lawyer beside him, flipping through papers like he was trying to build something out of nothing. My grandmother sat on the other. Calm. Composed. Her hands resting neatly in her lap. David sat beside her, a folder in front of him, organized, ready. I sat behind them, my backpack at my feet, my hands folded together to keep them from shaking. The judge entered. Everything settled. The case began. My father's lawyer spoke first. He talked about time. About contribution. About the years my father had lived in the house, the bills he had paid, the work he had done. He tried to turn presence into ownership. Effort into entitlement. The judge listened. Took notes. Didn't interrupt. Then David stood. And everything shifted. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't rush. He simply presented the facts. The deed. Filed and recorded. My grandmother's name, clear and unchallenged. 20 years of property tax records. Every single one in her name. No lease. No agreement. No transfer. Nothing. Your Honor, he said, this is not a matter of interpretation. It is a matter of documentation. The judge nodded. She turned to my father. Do you have any written evidence supporting your claim? There was a pause. A long one. No, he said finally. The room went still. The decision came quickly after that. My grandmother had the legal right to evict. He was given 15 days to vacate. 15. After ignoring the first 30. It was over. Just like that. Not with shouting. Not with drama. With paperwork. With truth. With a system that, for once, worked the way it was supposed to. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Brighter. Lighter. My father stood by his truck, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. You took everything from me, he said as we walked past. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was empty. My grandmother stopped. Looked at him. And for the first time, I saw something in her expression that wasn't just strength. It was sadness. I didn't take anything, she said quietly. I just stopped giving. He didn't respond. He got into his truck. And he left. No last word. No final attempt. Just gone. And just like that, the version of my life that had been controlled for so long, ended. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But completely. A few months later, I moved into my dorm at the University of Michigan. The campus felt like something out of a different world. Students walking with purpose, books in their hands, conversations about futures that were actually theirs to decide. I stood there with my backpack slung over my shoulder, the same one I had packed the night I left, and for a moment, it all felt unreal. Like I had stepped into someone else's life. But it wasn't. It was mine. I declared my major in education. Not because it was expected. Not because it was safe. But because it was something I chose. Every class, every assignment, every late night studying in the library, it all felt different. Not easy. But worth it. My grandmother called every Sunday. We talked about everything and nothing. Normal things. The kind of conversations I used to think only happened in other people's lives. And my father? We didn't speak. Not at first. Months passed before he called. His voice was quieter. Different. I saw your name on the dean's list, he said. There was a pause. Your mom would have liked that. I closed my eyes when he said it. Because for the first time, He said her name without using it as a weapon. Thank you, I said. And that was enough. For now. Because forgiveness isn't something you give just because someone asks for it. And healing isn't something that happens all at once. But my future? That was never his to control. It never was. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories and stay with us for more stories like this. And if you've ever had to walk away from something that was holding you back, share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. Because sometimes, the hardest step isn't leaving. It's realizing you were always allowed to.